it's time for today's perspective on the programme. And empathy, justice and solidarity. Those are the main themes in a new exhibition which opens this Thursday here in Paris. Empathy, justice and solidarity, in fact, around the current migrant crisis. It's a theme chosen by upcoming artist Elaine Hoey, whose work will go on display at the Irish Cultural Centre in the city here. Now, in it, Elaine uses technology, often virtual reality, in fact, to get over her points to her audience as she tackles whether the migrant crisis is really a crisis at all, and tackles as well the nationalist rise here in Europe. And Elaine Hoey joins me now here on set. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Just tell us then a little bit more in detail about exactly what your aim is in this exhibition.
So I suppose I've just really wanted to, raise awareness of the actual migrant crisis. Now, I made this work in 2016, and that was at the height of the migrant crisis. That was kind of, you know, the boat crisis that was happening across Europe, and there was thousands and thousands of people dying. So I suppose I wanted, firstly, I suppose we in Ireland were quite removed from that crisis, and both in taking refugees, but also in our experience of it. So a lot of our content was coming across the news, and I wanted to somehow collapse that distance and allow the person to become kind of completely immersed in a world that was quite scary, quite frightening. Also that no matter where that the person looked within the space, they couldn't look away from what was actually happening. And the main piece in the exhibition is called The Weight of Water, and it's a piece of virtual reality that the viewer goes into, and basically they take this boat journey with a group of refugees who tell them a story about their journey along the way. And I suppose it is about that sort of immersion and not being able to look away, and also sort of to implicate us in that narrative, you know, because we were so removed from it in Ireland. So
let's have a look at the other piece that we can show you some images of. Some beautiful images that we can see, effect of people suspended, as it looks like from what I've seen of, you know, in a great big room, white people. Here they are. Tell us about this piece here.
So this piece, when I made the piece about the refugee crisis itself, I became aware of this other thing that was happening in Europe, and that was the kind of this almost a backlash against what was happening and the rise of, or renewal in interest in the rise of nationalism. So I very much wanted to look at the role of where art had come into it. So I created this very large-scale museum, and in it I wanted to recreate these kind of nationalist paintings from the 19th century. So I took a model and I modded a game called Call of Duty, which is quite a nationalist game. So all of these characters in here are performing these very warlike stances, things like prone to death, dying. So all the stances are very much war related. So it was more about creating this very contemporary style, almost painting, but an animated painting.
So why do you feel so passionate about these issues? I mean, obviously the two issues that you've talked about are interlinked, aren't they?
Well, I grew up on the border of north and south of Ireland, and I was very steeped, I suppose, in nationalism growing up, not necessarily for my family, but within my community. And I became very kind of, I suppose, aware, particularly with what was happening in America and that very extreme rise in nationalism. And it really kind of jolted me out of that kind of, or being able to look at it from a different perspective and realising that there was a huge kind of problems with the notion of nationalism itself. And I suppose growing up in it, you don't see it, but when you were able to step back from what was actually happening, you begin to see the more ugly side of nationalism. And I suppose that is really basically what I'm trying to say in the exhibition is, or I'm trying to, I suppose, ask the question, is there another way to think about how we live in the world now? And is something like nationalism even useful anymore in regards to how we live now in the 21st century? So
do you feel it's always important then to mix politics and art? Because, I mean, it's the ongoing, ever-long debate, isn't it, in the art world?
Yes, for me, yes, because I think something like, particularly the migrant crisis, how could you not? It was one of the biggest humanitarian crises of the 2016, and I suppose to not address it, to me, seemed wrong or frivolous to do anything else. So that's it. You know, you were faced with it every day. So, and I suppose I'm very interested in the world around, how we live now, you know, how technology also can be used consciously, how we can use not just the bad side of technology, but how can we use technology consciously to, I suppose, look at some of these issues or address them or critique it even.
You're talking about nationalism and these issues. Obviously, you're obviously against them. I mean, there are obviously a lot of people who are for. I mean, would you encourage them to go along to the exhibition as well, or do you think maybe it's something that wouldn't really appeal to them?
I think anyone who is interested in politics should have an open mind about everything. Like, I'm not against nationalism at times, you know, where nationalism is used in a way to tackle humanitarian, you know, rights, or, you know, things like segregation, or countries that are under attack and where people band together. So there's useful nationalism, there's useful being patriotic, or that need to be. But after that, I don't know how useful it becomes in kind of how we live in the world now. So I suppose, yes, encourage. I mean, conversation is always good. I think any kind of conversation that raises questions or asks people to rethink about how we live in the world is always useful.
Just one last question very quickly. You're quite a new artist, aren't you? I mean, what's next for you?
I have a show coming up in the Museum of Modern Art in Dublin, and it's live performance in VR. So it's the first kind of very experimental work, and also a video game. So I kind of work across a number of mediums. Also, I'd like to do some more residencies. I spent 3 months here in the Irish Cultural Centre, which was amazing. And it was an award that I won in Dublin with the RDS Visual Arts Award. So it was, I think I'd like to have a lot more residencies, because it gives me a huge amount of time to become seeped in a country. Yeah. Particularly this piece was largely informed by a visit to the Louvre. So, yeah,
exactly. It's a perfect place to display it.
Yes, exactly.
Elaine, thanks very much. Elaine Hoey,
thank you very much for
joining us. Irish Cultural Centre. You can see it from Thursday.
And it's opening on the 24th.
Great, lovely. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme today. That's Perspective.